Welcome back to Cyberpunk 2077. We started up the game as a nomad because I wanted to see if they would do anything with it, and they did. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. The nomad isn't a yeehaw Confederate old boy. Instead, it's a indigenous American equivalent, which is much better. We catch a lot of racism, and it's a pretty good hook. You know, we got a lot of chips on our shoulder and people gunning for us just because of the color of our cybernetic skin. That's a much more appealing option, but they didn't tell me. The whole point of a life path is to onboard you, and if you're signed up for a story and you don't even realize what the story is until 20 minutes in, you're not really onboarded. You're just kind of blindly fumbling forward, but it's okay. It's not too shabby. This is definitely a course I can get behind. The only problem with it is, of course, that we now have to be harassed constantly for the next half hour or so, which isn't really my cup of tea, but it's the kind of game this is. If we had chosen one of the other life paths, we would have been just as harassed. The levels in this game are very boxy. They're box-centric levels. You can see what I'm talking about. You can see the square module setup that they're using here. They don't even bother to hide it. Instead, they're relying very heavily on clutter, which is an interesting idea. This is something we're going to talk about a lot once we get out of this particular garage, because there's a lot of town. It's not really a town. A lot of parking lot to talk about, and we can really start to see where their level design chops kind of falter a little bit. But first, we got to convince this guy to let us fix our own car.
That's fine. Step aside.
What? Got any idea what to do?
I've got a pretty high mechanic rating, so this animation is fantastic. Look at this. Oh, that was great. I love it.
Did anyone ask your opinion?
Now, we're written with a chip on our shoulder already, which is perfectly understandable because the people we're talking to don't much like us, and there's no reason to be nice to them. But we are given some interesting options in this upcoming dialogue with the sheriff. Putting aside how we treat this this slightly scammy mechanic, we do get to talk with the sheriff quite a bit more, and they of course have a bigger power differential than we would normally be able to respond to. So we can't blow off we can't blow off the sheriff. So when the sheriff arrives, you're going to see some very blunt force writing to show us who we are and the sort of treatment we can expect. It's not terrible. It's functional, and that's nothing I can complain about.
Not a solid fix. Might as well have used spit and duct tape.
It worked.
God, the shadows are so bad. This is ray traced? Give me a break.
Antenna on this heap don't seem like it packs a punch. Not liable to him.
Here comes the sheriff. Classic, completely stereotypical small-town sheriff.
Hey, Mike. Didn't know you had a customer.
Rolled in a few hours past. I thought she'd at least called in to you.
Don't you sweat it, Mike. We're gonna hash it out.
Don't spit in... What did Mike do to you that you would want to spit in his house?
When you pay his town a visit, to tell him what's brought you here. Maybe even over a cup of coffee.
So I kind of wish that this was framed just a little bit different so that we got a little bit of a bigger guy in the frame, but that's fine.
Name's Andrew Jones. Probably heard of me.
There's no point in responding.
Served in Spec Ops during the last war.
He says the same thing whether we respond or not. It's just a tutorial to show us that some conversations are timed, which is bad for me since I'm trying to do a Let's Play.
Don't like to get along, do ya?
Oh, what's that glitch? That's interesting.
That a nomad vehicle? Might have expected that.
I'll just fix it up and go.
Now here we're allowed to determine how annoyed we are by his blatant racism, or rather how annoyed we reveal ourselves to be. And it doesn't actually matter because it's just a tutorial sequence.
There's no clan.
We're learning a lot about ourselves at this point.
alone.
We are not part of whatever family we grew up with, and we're running alone. And that's
My
apparently
family's in
very
pieces.
unwise.
That's why I'm headed for Night City.
And that's why we're going to Night City, which is a fine setup. But the problem is, I'm not sure, it doesn't really make any sense in terms of how it integrates with the Night City troubles. There's nothing here that would be,
My antenna's down.
that would be a hook into a
What you
corporate,
need's to hightail
you
it
know,
out of here.
a corporate shenanigans plot.
Ain't got no mind to see you drifting around these parts. Got it?
I've made it clear. I don't want any trouble.
Then stop looking for it and hit the road quick.
Boom. Here we are. So this is the driving sequence. It's not terribly good, but I want to talk about the design of this level. I also need to talk just a little bit more about... ooh, he had a little skull above his head, which I think means he's superpowered. I also need to talk a little bit more about the blunt force approach they take to all of their writing so far. I've already said that we don't really have any in terms of connecting up to the plot. So obviously what they do is they brute force us. They give us a package that is integrated with the plot. But that's not really stakes for us. That's just a thing. It would have been much nicer if we had some personal reason to be involved. But they chose not to do that. As I said before, life paths are better if you do them right. Now let's talk a little bit about the design of this shantytown that they've got built here. Obviously this is just a lightweight village for us to do our opening mission in. We're only here for 5 minutes unless I spend 20 hours talking about it like I usually do. I could try and open this locked door, but I think that guy would probably try and kill me. He's got great arms. You should ride with me instead of sticking out with these guys. These guys are trashy.
Where are you off to, huh?
That's fine. So the actual assets in use here are pretty good. I have some complaints about the nature of some of these things, since this is not how sheet metal buildings... I've never seen a sheet metal building put together like that, but that's just me being aggressive about things. In general, I find these assets are quite nice, but the problem with these assets is, of course, that they are aggressively square, as you can see. All of these buildings are extremely square. That's not necessarily unrealistic. In fact, it's quite realistic, but it is boring. And it's better for the sake of the game if you don't have to worry about that. No, that's not what I wanted. Where's my crouch button? Yeah, it's whatever. Let's not open any locked doors in front of crowds. I'm not sure how they'll react. But as you can see, it's all super duper square. This is made a lot more uncomfortable when the land has to be pretty much barren. There's not really any sort of thing in these roads to break up the flatness, but they did a pretty good job. I'm actually impressed at how good this is for a tutorial town which you're not expected to explore in any detail. Makes me wonder whether or not maybe we come back here at some point, because they've got things like these gentle rises, which I often talk about, and there are a lot of places that aren't super square, which we'll talk about in a second. And there's a lady on the roof smoking a cig. This, however, is bad. You see that little boop, 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 boop? You see that? I don't know if you can sense that. My head is hitting these coats. See? This is actually a very common problem in this game so far. I have died several times due to accidentally touching things that were below head height and suffering critical damage because of it, including in cutscenes. So we're not going to be focusing on the bugs, but they may focus on us. A few more details I really love. I love these wires. Wires are a big thing that I love quite a bit, as you might have noticed from my talk about the car animation earlier when we were plugging the cables in. I noticed that they've also put a different flag up here. Rather than the Confederate flag, they've got some kind of slightly Nazi-esque star flag, which is interesting, and I appreciate that. Yeah, they were at least wise enough to not put the Confederate flag up. And here we are on top of the building where we've got these beautiful, beautiful pipes. Pipes. If you want to know my opinion on pipes, I recommend that you watch the 30 or so videos I did on Control, which is mostly me talking about how their pipes are good. One thing I don't like about this is that all of these buildings are ortho. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's not a whole lot of reason to make them ortho. The only building that's not ortho, meaning 90 degrees from each other, you know, is this guy over here, which isn't really a building. It's just a camper, right? So, okay, I was just checking to see if I was allowed to open those. I guess not. So the camper is non-ortho, and that's nice. But we can't go inside or see inside, so my guess is that the buildings that they put... no, because these don't have interiors either. I'm trying to figure out a reason why they were so aggressively square with their buildings, and maybe it's because that's the tone they wanted to give off. Maybe they thought that it would make the place feel more poor and barren and flat. Now, the problem is these are kind of realistic-ish, but they're not very evocative or appealing. And once again, they've relied very heavily on junk. Rather than trying to craft their levels to have good flow, good eye lines, break up the squareness with some good architectural features, they just fill their levels with crap. And in this case, the crap is mostly these bushes. I don't really appreciate that. It's not terrible, but it's also not great. Let's see. We could talk about the town some more if we really wanted to, but there's really nothing in this town. I don't know. These guys have yellow markers on them. I think that makes them, if not hostile, extremely dangerous. Yeah. I don't really have any urge to get myself killed, but I mean, what's the point? It's no big deal if I do, right? No vacancy, huh? Or vacancy. So it's cute that they have a vacancy sign on this camper as if it's a hotel. It might even be a hotel. This sort of thing would be awesome if it was like built on. It sort of makes me want to see a small town in the Cyberpunk universe, just because we would get to know the individual people a lot more, and we'd get to see all sorts of strange little things like this. Let's see if this guy will kill us. Nope. You just can't talk to him. All of these people are handcrafted. They're not using the randomized tool. They all have very, very primitive, basic setups visually. I think this guy is actually a clone of the guy we were just looking at over there.
You, want something, Chum?
And he can talk without moving his mouth. Fantastic work, guy. Really working up those skills.
Hey, is there something I can do for you?
What?
I'm kind of busy.
Okay, as someone who's been forced to wear a mask for a year, sure, you go for it.
I got a meeting.
Do you? Alright, I don't think I can pick any locks. Okay, so basically I just wanted to point out that this tiny little town is already full of assets. This is like... I wouldn't want to guess how much money this costs, but this is a team of assets. This is a lot of assets. This is a weird pose. It says to talk to her, but I can't. I think she's supposed to be a kid, but she doesn't have the face of a kid. It's kind of creepy. Anyway, super expensive in terms of the price of the assets to put together. And I can't imagine it'll get much reuse. If the game takes place in Night City, I have no idea if the game takes place entirely in Night City, but that's where all the pictures take place. That's, you know, all the things that we get shown take place. If that's the case, then I don't imagine any of these assets would be of any use anywhere else, which is an interesting thing to spend all your money on. The other player setups, the other life paths, have their own missions, and one of the reasons I chose this one is because I hadn't seen it. But those all take place in Night City using Night City assets. This one doesn't, and I wonder whether or not this place shows up later as kind of a hub for everybody or not. It would be really expensive if it didn't. Anyway, here you can see more of these assets. You can't break into any place, but this is, of course, the classic tower climb. Oh my god, they're opening with this. I'm gonna just climb a tower for... Alright, I gotta actually climb it. Climbing a tower. Yeah, so tower climbing is a joke at this point. It is something that we talk about as a comedy bit because it's so overdone. And here they're just making it do it straight. Oh look, a radio tower. Gosh, I've never climbed one of these before.
Hello?
Come in. Come in. Ah, raised you finally.
So this is where we learn a little bit more about our specific situation.
Wish I could say the
We're a
same.
smuggler, but we stopped working with our family, so we're a freelance smuggler, which is unhealthy.
I can't help you anymore.
Never knew you to be so cautious.
Try loyal. Rules are rules. The system won't work without him.
Who's that driving around down there, I wonder?
Nomads get the work in these parts because it's nomad turf. Wouldn't be a problem if you're still a backer. You should have stuck with them. Joined up with the Snake Nation like the rest.
Snake Nation can kiss my ass.
So we need to be a little bit careful, or rather they need to be a little bit careful about how much they say about the nomad culture, because if it is an indigenous bastardization, if it is something based on indigenous culture, it would be extremely easy to screw it up. So my guess is that they won't mention it again. It'll just be like, that's the last of it.
Right place, right time.
But I don't know, because I haven't played very much of the game.
My car gave out. The electric coupling. It's a miracle I made it here. Maybe the client left a message. Did you check for me?
Sure. Last time, though. I mean it. Client's name?
Jackie Wells.
So this is a little bit flabby in terms of writing, but it does establish what it needs to establish. It's not too bad.
He's waiting on a farm.
Having to climb a radio tower, though, oh my god. It does give us a really good view while we're getting this pointless conversation over the radio. One of the biggest issues with this kind of game is how to make interesting conversations when you're on like a radio or something and you can't really do any sort of staging or social cues. You can't really do anything. One of the ways around that is to not have it, to have a hands-free, to have a hands-free setup. And a lot of games do that where, and this game does that too, where you can wander around and do other things while the conversation is going on. And you have to move to the couch and stuff like that. That sort of thing works pretty well, and it's not a bad idea. But in this case, we were just stuck talking over the radio to a guy we'll probably never meet, and so we never really had much of a chance to make that interesting. So they tried to make the view pretty, at least. I still think that was an incredibly boring segment, though. Let's go and talk to our buddy. I'm using a controller because the car, at least, is extremely difficult to control with a keyboard. Also, the camera is really chunky. I don't like that. Howdy. I'm sure that was full of people. So here we're seeing a classic southwestern desert view, which implies that the town of Night City is like Phoenix, Arizona or something, which is interesting. But it's one of those situations where it's clearly been just smacked down, and then we've got these background hills that I would almost guarantee are just matte paintings. I suppose they might be modeled, but they're obviously very low poly. It's not a bad thing at all. It's just that it's so... This kind of view makes me remember how this isn't how it looks. There's many details about how this doesn't happen. You see how it's all uniformly dotted with a scrub? That's not how scrub works. It's not really their fault, but as someone from this exact kind of terrain, it just makes me itch a little bit. Anyway, we got some plot to do, so we're going to just leave the car way out here. Nose pointed in here and ass out to the road, quite far from the door, and then we'll go inside and take a look. This is a classic sort of setup, right? Go to an abandoned location, meet the guy in there. This is a tutorial, though, so we don't have to worry about it being trapped too much. Still, we'll just do a quick sweep, see what there is to see. And you can see that we can actually take a peek inside and try and get a glimpse of the guy we're going to be talking to. I'm actually not sure that he's visible. Oh, that was a glitch. There's a lot of popping glitches. There was one in the oh, is that an interesting one? There was one earlier in the garage before I started recording. The guy's face was freaking out in the same way. Yay, ashtrays. Let's pick up all the junk.
Oh, I was worried I'd have to turn to farming.
I'm here for you, but first I gotta steal your shit.
I believe I am. Are you...
Name's Jackie Wells.
V. Seems you have cargo that needs to be moved.
Oh, where I'm from, you share a bit about your soul before you talk biz. Huh?
That's pretty forced.
Kind of like a custom. Or just good manners, you know?
Why don't we start with you then?
So this person is your first friend.
Got Haywood in my blood.
This was a really good idea. His writing is pretty iffy, but in general, one of the things I always say is that you need to have somebody on your side, someone that appreciates you, pretty early on in the game. It gives you something to hold on to. If everybody's hostile, then it's no good. So this person is allied with us regardless of our backstory, and he appears to be very loyal. I haven't gotten far enough into the game to see if he turns on us, but in all of the openings, he seems to
Let's load it in the car.
be very... he bends over backwards for us constantly. So we're going to go ahead and see how long we can get along with him. First, we're going to pick up some junk first. There we are.
Started
Scissors.
thinking you might not come.
I got held up. And you weren't exactly easy to find.
Ooh, teleporting car.
Decided to lay low, you know? The sheriff looked like one grouchy motherfucker.
Yep.
So touching this car will kill you. Be very careful.
What a fat ass. So,
All right.
we headed out?
Yep. We're going to go through the opening scene here, but it's been 20 minutes. We're going to get a little bit closer, and then we're going to call it a day. We'll do the actual border skit in the next episode.
Do you have the manifest from the transport?
Of course I do. But the fixer didn't give you the job deeds?
He did.
So now we're becoming aware that we're faking it a little bit. Oh, this is not how roads work.
We're both professionals, ain't we?
Really?
We ain't lost, are we?
We ain't lost. I'm just complaining about the state of the roads in Arizona, which is legit, but they generally are... They don't look like that.
Sure you've moved contraband before?
Why? Are you nervous?
Me? Ha! Por favor. Well, maybe a little.
So we've got some light banter going on to let us know that this is the first time we've met and we're trying to get along and so on and so forth. It's functional. It's nothing that I'd write home about, but it's functional. We see that there's a lot of militarization here, heavy helicopters, smoke, that sort of stuff. This is a good spot for us to stop for the day and see you next time.